A woman lived happily with her children in their home, and they enjoyed a joyful and fulfilling life together. Once there was a woman, innocent and kind-hearted, struggling to raise her children in the harshest of circumstances. Life had not been easy for her. She had given up her dreams, her peace, and even her own happiness for the sake of her husband and children. Each day was a battle against the world's cruelty, and each night she prayed to Allah, asking for patience and gratitude despite the relentless pain. Her husband, once her protector, had become distant. She was left to face the hardships alone. Her adversary, a ruthless man who wanted to destroy her life, did everything he could to torment her. He tried to break her spirit, but she never wavered. She endured, holding on to the love for her children and the belief that somehow, one day, everything would be all right. One night, as she slept with her children by her side, her world was shattered. The sound of banging at the door woke her up, her heart pounding in her chest. Before she could comprehend what was happening, armed police officers, led by her enemy, stormed into the house. They grabbed her forcefully, dragging her away from her children. She screamed for help, but no one came to her aid. They took her to the police station, where she was left to face a world of accusations, betrayal, and uncertainty. Her children were left behind, terrified, and alone. They waited, hoping someone would come for them, but no one did. Hours turned to days, and still no one from her family came. Her lawyer had deceived her, and her husband, who should have been by her side, was far away in another country, unaware of the horror unfolding at home. A woman was forcibly detained by the police, placed in a vehicle without explanation, and transported to another city. The woman is desperately holding onto her enemy's feet, begging him to let her go to her children. Her enemy is coercing her into signing a check, using threats to manipulate and trap her. In that cold, lonely cell, the woman felt the weight of despair settle in her chest, but she didn't give up. She still held on to the hope that somehow, somewhere, someone would find her, someone would fight for her, and she would one day reunite with her children. But the truth was cruel. The arrest warrant for both her and her husband had been issued, and her children were taken away from her, further than she could ever imagine. Every day, as she sat there, helpless, her heart broke for her children, who must have felt abandoned, and for herself, who had sacrificed everything, only to be punished in the end. But even in the darkest moments, she never stopped praying. She prayed for her children's safety, for her own release, and for the strength to endure, knowing that her love for her family would never die, no matter how far apart they were. Her journey was not over. It was just the beginning of a new battle for justice, for truth, and for the right to be with her children again. Each day, the woman's heart ached more, as she found herself begging on the streets, her eyes constantly searching for a way out of the endless torment. Her small 2-year-old son was always on her mind, his innocent face, his small hands reaching out to her, unaware of the cruelty around them. The thought of him suffering without her tore her apart. Her husband, who should have been her protector, was far away, unable to return without risking his own capture. The enemy had taken everything from them, the money they had earned, through blood, sweat, and years of hard work. Every bit of it was gone, stolen by the same man who sought to destroy their lives. The woman walked the streets, surrounded by police officers, as if she were nothing more than a shadow of the life she once knew. Each step felt heavier than the last, her body exhausted, her spirit breaking. She begged, not for herself, but for her children. She prayed to God, hoping for a miracle, something, anything that would bring her family back together. But there was no one. No brother to come to her rescue, no friend to offer a helping hand. Her children were alone, left without anyone to protect them. No one cared. And even her husband in another country was suffering the same fate, unable to come back for her. Despite all the suffering, despite the overwhelming pain of being separated from her children, the woman never gave up. Her love for them fueled her strength. She refused to let them lose hope, even if it meant sacrificing her own. Her will was unshaken. She knew her life was falling apart, but she would never let that darkness touch her children. No matter how hard it became, she whispered words of encouragement to them, hoping they could still feel her love, even from afar. Her journey was one of survival not just for her, but for the love she held for her children. She kept going, knowing she had to stay strong for them. In the face of everything, betrayal, loss, and despair, she found the courage to keep moving forward. She might have been alone, but her heart was still full of the love and determination that would one day, she hoped, bring her family back together. The woman sat in the cold, dimly lit courtroom, her body trembling beneath the heavy shawl that barely covered her. She had been in remand for days now, 3 long days, without a single word from her children. She had been torn from them, her heart screaming in agony as she was pushed through a system that seemed designed to break her spirit. She had never known anything but pain in her life, but now this new suffering felt unbearable. The judge's words echoed in her ears, but they didn't reach her heart. How could they? How could anything matter when her children were out there, alone, waiting for her, wondering why their mother wasn't there to hold them? She had lived her life bearing the weight of countless trials, the hardship of losing herself to take care of her family, and yet every new day seemed to bring a deeper sorrow. But this was different. This was the cruelty of being separated from the ones she loved most. For 3 days she had fought the silence. She tried to stay strong, tried to find some shred of hope. But the walls of the police station felt like a tomb, the cold iron bars a constant reminder of her helplessness. No one came to her defense. No one stood up for her. It felt as though the world had turned its back on her, leaving her in the darkest place she had ever known. And yet, even in her despair, she held on to something that had always kept her going, her love for her children. She thought of their faces, the way they would smile when she held them close, the warmth of their little hands in hers. That was what kept her from sinking into the abyss. Even though she had been broken, betrayed, and left in pain, she clung to the thought of them. The woman's heart bled for them. Her heart bled for the little ones, who didn't understand why their mother wasn't there to comfort them. She had endured so much, but this was something no mother should ever have to face. Every minute that passed felt like a lifetime. The absence of her children felt like an open wound, raw and endless. She had spent her life enduring one hardship after another, but this new agony of separation was a test that seemed too great. She looked up at the judge, but her eyes were empty. She was no longer fighting for herself. She was fighting for them, for the ones she loved more than life itself. The pain was too much to bear, but she would keep going, because in that pain there was still hope. A hope that one day, somehow, she would be reunited with the children she had never stopped loving, no matter the cost. That woman, after facing many difficulties, returns to her city from the airport, and upon reaching the airport, hugs her children and cries. The helpless woman endured oppression from every side, and no one stood by her. She, along with her children and mother, bore it all alone. Her silence amid such trials speaks volumes. It seems like she was enduring not just external hardship, but also an internal struggle, choosing to stay quiet in the face of so much adversity. It makes one wonder, in such situations, does silence become a shield, or is it the quiet before a storm? What do you think?